Testing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, guys, let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. First of all, let me just say this. Welcome. Happy Monday, everybody. We're going to have a really good show. Definitely want to talk about the Diddy trial. We have a special guest, and I'm about to bring him up in a minute. Of course, Judge Joe Brown. This is Man Up Monday with Judge Joe Brown and me, the real Dana. And then we're going to talk about later in the show what's going on, what everybody's talking about throughout the nation, the LA riots, and now some protests is spewing up in New York City. So, is this going to be the trend of the summer? I hope not, because I don't it's too hot to be going doing all that, honey. The federal government got a job to do. Yes, they do. But we're going to get into that later with the LA riots. And, we have to talk about that. But we also have to talk about the Diddy trial because that is going on right now. So, yes, you guys can hear me. Please hit the like button. Please share this video on all your social media outlets. Today is Hat Day because I'm between hair appointments. Just a little FYI, and I'm dealing with my allergies kind of bad all day today. So I may sound like a little stuffy, and I may have to take myself off of the video for a sec if I need to blow my nose. Just letting you guys know. So before I bring up the guest, the judge should be popping in because I saw him pop in and I don't know what happened. He popped out. Um, before I bring the guest up, just a little quick monologue, and I wanted to acknowledge an RIP to Sly Stone. So let me share this. Actually, let me make this bigger, like I'll do it like that. Yeah. So yeah, Sly Stone dead at 82. Now, this is my parents' generation, but growing up listening to their music, of course, I've heard of this band, the Sly and the Family Stone, legendary. And this is the front man, and he passed away today. So yes, it says Stone died Monday in Los Angeles, and his family released a statement saying he died from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and other health issues. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by his 3 children, his closest friend, and extended family. So yeah, if you haven't heard, now you know. Everyday people. Remember that song? I and everyday people. Classic. So yeah, so he passed away. And I wanted to acknowledge that. Good music. And I didn't know, and I caught earlier that the BET Awards is on tonight. So yeah, odd timing. Let me just text the judge real quick. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Maybe he's trying to hop back in. I don't know. I'm texting the judge because I saw him come in and then he bounced out. So I want to make sure everything is okay with his Wi-Fi. Yeah, he's not picking up. He's probably trying to log back in. So we'll just give him a couple more minutes. Hi, Katalia, Voodoo, Hello Mel. Hi, guys. Call President Anthony. Yes, RIP Sly Stone. So I did start a goal. So if you guys want to support the machine, support the platform, please send in questions and comments via super chats. Yeah, it's greatly appreciated. Or you can cash at me as well. So while we wait for the judge, honey, I want to bring up the guest because I'm excited. Hi, this is Miss Candace Kelly. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing? It's so good to see you. I love all your energy from your people talking.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself to my people, to the audience.
Absolutely. I'm Candice Kelly, and I'm a legal analyst as well as I teach the law. And I also serve as an expert witness on various big time defamation cases. But I really like to teach the law to people, and I've been following this Sean Combs case in the court. I actually was covering his case in 2001 too, the shooting case, 24 years ago for BET News. So I did gavel to gavel with that, and here I am again with Sean Combs, and here we go. It's funny because inside and outside of the courtroom, it's kind of just a circus in both arenas, especially outside though. Those people getting in and now the public wanting to get in and really support him, they are there. It is never a dull moment when you are down at 500 Pearl Street in New York City.
So he has a lot of supporters coming out.
He has a lot of supporters. For those folks who are coming in who are the public, who come in and either they make it into the courtroom, they allow 14 people inside of the courtroom who are members of the public, 21 people who are members of the press. And if you don't get into the main courtroom, you go into a spillover room. And in that room, I mean, it is just filled with mostly the public and mostly supporters of Sean Combs, who say they want to see justice done and they're sharing their conspiracy theories. I mean, it's really really interesting. And if you've seen any of the video on the outside, I mean, people are getting arrested, punched, berated, embarrassed, followed, scolded. It is quite a sight. If somebody had a camera, that would be a whole reality show, and that's at like 6, 7, 8 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, the public is there, the press is there, loads of folks there, and more people as we get to this verdict. That's going to be something. That's going to be something.
Are you there every day?
I'm there 3 times a week
Okay.
because I spend the other 2 days making appearances on shows like yours. You're my fourth or fifth show today that I get on and talk about the law, talk about various aspects of, the witnesses, and really are we reaching that RICO statute type of thing, because a lot of people have a hard time understanding what the heck that is.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not an expert in the law. Of course, me and the judge, we do this show every Monday.
Hmm.
And then on Wednesdays, I do my own show. And, when he comes up, I guess, he'll go in more details. But this whole RICO thing, for me personally, listen, I think it's a stretch to charge Diddy with RICO. Now, is he an abuser? Yes. But I don't know. I just think it's and then hearing a witness's testimony is kind of crazy. It's like, okay, what were these people doing and why didn't you just leave? I don't know. It's just it seemed like the prosecutors are pulling at any and everything to make RICO stick and to convince the jurors that you need to convict him under RICO.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things is kind of this relatability problem that people have with RICO, because when we think of RICO, we think, crime families and mafia and all the things that we've seen on TV with Scarface and Goodfellas. And so I think that a lot of people are like, that's not Sean. He was a successful businessman, right? Like he had all of these businesses. Are you trying to tell me that all of that was created or existed at one point just so he could commit crimes? See, that's where I don't think that the jury's going to buy it. Even though legally, if you look at what he did, once you get the paper and the judge gives those instructions, they could get to RICO. I just think that there's a huge relatability problem because the way that we're trained in the media and what we understand with the Gambione family, it doesn't match up with Sean. Even though I think that the RICO has been met, I just don't know if jurors will say, "Oh, this whole enterprise," which is what the law says. The law says this whole enterprise existed just for you to do these underlying crimes. I don't I don't know if that'll stick. I don't know if that'll stick, Dana.
And so again, so when I spoke to you earlier, I said, okay, so you between you and the judge, I'm really the juror here.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate you explaining that because that's how I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. His enterprise, how he made his wealth, it was not by illegal means, but yes, he solicited prostitutions for his sexual whatever, but he was paying them. He wasn't making money from it. So that's why I'm not believing the RICO too much. And I do see the judge and I'm about to bring him in. Just real quick, the witness today, Jane,
Yes, Jane.
because we all know who Jane is.
But we're not going to say, and that's been a big contention in the courtroom too, is bloggers specifically. A couple said the name, and that was brought up today. Like, what are we going to do about these publishers? They are not done with any of these bloggers who have mentioned the names. And here's the thing that people have to understand: you can mention a name and then say, oh, but someone else mentioned it first. That is not enough. If you mentioned it, you're just as guilty as the first person. And that's where some mistakes were made, I think. And I can understand, or maybe you might be reading a comment that says the name. Yeah, but I didn't say it. Somebody in the comment section said it. No, you actually said it. And that therein lies the problem. So, a lot of lessons learned. A lot of lessons learned.
All right, so hi, Judge. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
Good.
Hello, how are you?
Ma'am, how are you, counselor?
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. I want to say for the record, I'm a legal analyst while I did complete law school, and I teach the law. I never practiced. I went right into TV, right? I landed where you landed, Judge.
That was after 40 years.
Exactly, exactly. You put in that groundwork. Very good to see you.
So
Greetings.
this is Candace Kelly. I wanted to make sure you knew her name first and last. And so she's here because she's given us, the details, what's going on, what's been going on in the courtroom, in the Diddy trial, and of course outside the courtroom. But I wanted to take this conversation a lot of people are talking about the money, financial empire, because this is RICO. And if he is found guilty, he has a trust for his kids and probably a trust for his estate. But if he is found guilty, that trust can be broken, right? And what repercussions then after that? Can he potentially die a broke man and his family um live without the wealth that they were accustomed to?
Hmm. That is such a big question. One of the things, and I'm not sure if that was for the judge or for me, but you
It's for
know,
You take it.
yeah, one of the things that we have to realize, first of all, is that you have a trust or an irrevocable trust. It's not public record. That's very different from a will. So I'm not sure what he has in place. But like you said, what is at stake when it comes to a RICO statute is everything. Everything that potentially he touched inside of this criminal enterprise, that's what's at stake in terms of what he could lose. So that's really all his businesses were listed in the indictment, whether it's Sean John, whether it's Bad Boy, Love Records. There were a couple that I was looking up. Empower Global, Fair Share. These are businesses that were set up in order to help other businesses, especially during COVID. So his liquor brands, all of these were involved. And we did hear somebody on the stand come from Bad Boy, an executive, to talk about the kind of intermingling and collaboration between all of them. So that is why there's a very vague kind of cast the net. You know what? We want everything that was in the indictment when it comes to forfeiture and forfeiting assets. Now, as we know, as a lot of people know, there was somebody that was hired, a forfeiture asset specialist that was hired in order to help Sean. Because guess what? He does need that help. This person was hired last month. This was someone who used to work for the Department of Justice, has been working there since 1985, and now he consults on cases like this to help people specifically like Sean Combs who are in trouble and do not what to do, because it's a very complicated process. Is it not, Judge? Very complicated.
About 45 years ago, some people, including Joe Biden, Eastland, Stennis, et cetera, and Byrd, came up with some drastic changes in federal criminal procedure that allow the prosecution to effectively use their authority to persecute, irrespective of likely outcomes on convictions or not. The idea is if we can't convict them, let's destroy them financially. It isn't consistent at all. And I've noticed over the last 45 years, there's a complete deterioration in the habit or circumstance of trying to prove there's a connection between what the person is on trial for and how they got the income. Just because somebody has investments does not mean that all of those investments are the fruits of organized crime activity, racketeering. Actually, what it looks like to me, from my experience with that corrupt West Coast nonsense, is it's just everybody was trying to get mutual blackmail on everybody else so nobody could be in a position to take advantage of somebody else. I think this trial has gotten way overboard, and I noted there were 14 pages for what essentially is a 5-count indictment, which, considering that 4 of those counts come out of the Mann Act. My experience in defending people tried with such things is for 5 counts on something like that, you'd get 2.5 pages max on an indictment, and then have to fight like hell in order to get some specificity as to what they're talking about. In this, they laid it out, had press conferences, and it looked to me like they were trying to discredit someone. So even if that person were acquitted, there would be such a shadow cast over this person that nobody would give credence to anything that they had to see. That's just my outlook on it.
You know,
It's just a pimp game. And I'm sure, I'll interject this, I'm sure somewhere in here, if the defense is adequate, it's going to, considering they do have financial resources, bring in clinical psychologists and a bevy of experts to talk about such things as sadomasochism and such considerations. I used to represent a lot of pimps and prostitutes, and what I'm looking at is a familiar game, very common, sadomasochism.
But now I am thinking in this context, though, when we talk about prostitution, what has been made, and I think that the defense has thrown away this particular thing, like we're not even going to argue this anymore, that, I mean, we've heard at least from about 20 men through pictures or names through the witnesses that did cross state lines for purposes of getting paid for sex. And I'm wondering what you think about that, because that is the charge, and it does seem like they are there and they've been there dozens of times at this point.
Well, they've got a problem with the whole statute. It was propounded in 1911, if I'm not mistaken, to get Jack Johnson. And what the statute itself says is transporting females across state lines for, quote, illicit purposes, unquote. In Jack Johnson's case, it was his white wife, and they got him going through Georgia when they had been through there about 15 minutes because Georgia did not recognize interracial marriage. So the marshals boarded the train along with a few FBI agents who weren't authorized to be armed in those days, and they arrested Jack Johnson and charged him with transporting his wife across state lines. I had a case here in Memphis, which might be edifying. It involved a male school teacher and a female school teacher. The male school teacher had a sibling who was involved in the drug trade, and to get leverage, what the FBI did is they followed the school teaching brother around, and he went to a conference over in West Memphis, Arkansas. He ran into the woman who was also a school teacher, and they hadn't seen each other since college. So they had just gotten divorced, both of them, and they decided to see if there was a spark still there. So she rode in his car leaving hers in West Memphis and drove over here, and they checked into a hotel in Memphis, and the FBI arrested them for Mann Act violations and were trying to extort his cooperation in being evidence against his brother. I got him acquitted, but I mean, it was a mess.
Yeah, it's the overcharging here is it sounds like that's what you're talking about. And what's interesting is that a lot of shows I go on, we definitely talk about the prosecution side because we are in that space. But as you said, the defense, they will bring a forensic psychologist to talk about Sean Combs. Because one thing that really stuck out to me as you sit there in court each day, just from the second, third week after jury selection, is that Sean Combs was an addict. Like just an addict in the way that you think about somebody on the street. Like it's a very different understanding that I got when I sat there every single day. So that's a good part of his defense. He's clean now, from what I understand, being behind bars. Also, Sean Combs was he's addicted to sex. So I think that that's something else that will come in with the defense. Another thing I think too is that just the digital footprint between the text, the emails, and the love that these women had for him. You definitely need a psychologist to contextualize that because a lot of it is just hard to understand. Dana, I'll throw this to you just as a person on the jury, right, who doesn't have a legal background. Does it seem though as though these women had a choice, or the fact that we did see this? Let's just take the video that we're all familiar with at the Intercontinental Hotel. There was somebody who was in that room, according to testimony, not just Cassie. So you could, as a juror, say, well, it did look like she was being dragged back to a freak off. And to me, that sticks, but I'm not sure in a jury's mind what they're thinking.
What does that have to do with criminal enterprise?
Well, because one of the predicate crimes is the sex trafficking, which you have to get there by force or fraud or coercion. And if you are coercing her to go back to the freak off, well, then that's how it connects.
So
that's the argument.
Okay. The reason I raised that is, are you familiar with the cartoon series that Dell Comics made into Wonder Woman?
Yes.
Okay, you are aware of the fact that the person that invented the polygraph is the one that invented Wonder Woman. You ever read what he had to say about his wife, and the person he based the character on that was their live-in girlfriend for, I think, 17 years, and sadomasochism and what she was talking about? And in his writing, she's describing just about what you are finding out about this trial with Diddy, and he was saying it was the most glorious thing in the world. So I'm sure if they are on their game, they would be trying to bring in something to refute that, show that this is not criminal activity, this is just freak.
Right, it's freak. And so me being a juror, right, and on this show,
yeah,
it's freak, and he is an abuser. That's how I look at it. I don't look at, oh, you're dragging her against her will back to her freak off. It looks like she was with you for 10 years. It was an abusive relationship. It was on and off. She did love him. That's a fact. He did love her. I believe he did. But Kim Porter was his soulmate, yada, yada, yada. And he's Diddy, so he's going to do what he has to do. But he was a woman beater. And he had these people would say sexual deviants, how he likes sex, right? And any woman he was with, they will have to partake in it. You could have left. If you didn't want to do it, you could leave. He never forced anyone to stay against their will. And so they're trying to use the hotel video saying, oh, he drug her back to the freak off against her will. That one incident of a relationship that was filled with domestic violence, not me kidnapping you and bringing you back to a freak off. So I said earlier that the prosecutors are just throwing stuff on the wall and saying that's what this is and hoping that something stick. Because I look at it, where is the accountability at with these women?
I'll tell you what they threw though that did stick. First of all, a lot of things, but the big things that I walked away with that really made me say, "Oh wow, hadn't read about that, hadn't seen that," and I said, "My Lord." Cassie Ventura's mother, Sean Combs, said, "You need to send me $20,000," and they showed evidence of that money was sent, or else I'm going to release these sex videos of your daughter. The mother went and gets a second loan on her home, sends the money. That to me, now you can say a lot of things about the beating, sexual abuse, and maybe the sadomasochism. They like that. But now you're talking to my mama? No, that's all I can say is no, that is unacceptable and that is extortion, even though he gave the money back. And I do not think that passes muster for anybody on the defense side. In fact, they didn't even cross-examine her mother, and I think for a lot of good reasons.
I have to agree with
What does that
Yeah.
have to, by the way, just curious, that's proof of other crimes, but what does it directly have to do with this trial?
Well, the prosecution is saying in the criminal enterprise that Sean Combs heads up, he's the one who made this happen, that he had the power to say, "Send me that money," which he did. He had the power over these freak off videos saying, "I'm going to keep it up, Cassie. I'm going to let these videos go and I'm going to ruin your career. I'm going to share it with your mom, your dad, all their co-workers." This is what he said, and then told the mother, "If you don't want this to happen, send me that money." So that would be a prerequisite to the RICO statute. That's how it's presented. I'm just explaining how those
Well,
time.
the question, isn't that a bit hypocritical on behalf of the New York U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuting Trump for what Stormy Daniels was doing to him, extorting him into paying hush money?
I see your point. Definitely agreed. However, when you look at all of these facts, I think it lands a little differently. But there definitely is some hypocrisy involved. You are correct. I mean, I think there's hypocrisy involved in terms of the way that they charge people to begin with. Um, you can't look at the justice system and not talk about race. Let's start there. I don't care. And they tried to bring it in a couple times, but it didn't stick. Of course, this has to do with race. Of course, this has to do with Sean Combs ponying around, calling himself the king of New York, and some folks just not liking the look of that. So I do understand that there are a lot of elements, but a lot of them just can't refute the fact that this woman got a loan. Let's start there. That,
So,
yeah.
let me include this because, yeah, so you saying it is a lot of allegations of coercions and
Yes.
manipulations. And it at times the prosecutors, from what I was reading with the transcripts and stuff, they kind of were able to prove some of that, especially when you say, well, if you do this, then I'm going to release the photos. um and that is a form of manipulation and coercion, trying to not some not physically force, but trying to manipulate someone to do something you want them to do. Now, he never released it, but just to hang something over somebody's head. But is that RICO? And
Mhm.
is that a RICO? Is that part of this whole RICO, saying that his whole enterprise, the
Yeah.
alcohol, the fashion, the music, the publishing, everything, um, his whole enterprise is based under manipulation and coercion. I can't. I'm
Coercion. I'm gonna help you out, Dana.
terrible.
Well, I see what the judge is saying and that, and you too. Like, what does it have to do with anything? These were legitimate businesses, right? We listened to the music. We could buy Sean Combs down at Macy's when he had that exclusive contract. all of this was just for prostitution, that's where I think it's going to be a hard sell. However, these underlying crimes, even without saying RICO, the underlying crimes, I think that there's a lot to be said about what he did that they can actually prove and have the receipts for. And that's the
Well,
unfortunate part for him.
here's the thing that troubles me, counselor. When I represented people who got charged with this quite often, pimps would have prostitutes in West Memphis, Arkansas. They'd bring them across the bridge to Memphis, Tennessee, go down to Mississippi, where it's subject to this franchise called P Valley. They would bust them for that, and they would talk about entering a plea to 1 year. So 1 year times 4 is interesting because he has no prior record for this. And they want to take 1 year sentence, which is what would be called for under the current guidelines, and they want to transport this into organized crime activity. Even Jack Johnson got 1 year. He
Mm.
escaped and he got 5 years for escaping. But the other thing that troubles me is has there been, I haven't been listening to this thing every day, but has there been any evidence brought in as to why Homeland Security served the warrant rather than the FBI, whose very existence came about in order to come up with the Mann Act?
Well, Homeland Security, they say, was involved when they raided both of his homes because of the
Mhm.
trafficking of human bodies part. That's where they said
Yeah.
that falls under their umbrella.
Yeah, but there's one caveat to when you have Homeland Security involved. Per statutes, they get to squawk about national security and they can get somebody held incommunicado so they cannot communicate. I'm helping somebody out, giving a little guidance on an attempt to get a pardon. A crime-free person blew the whistle on somebody, and they had Homeland Security do that so they could gag the woman
Mm.
so she could not communicate about her side of what was going on. She had no convictions. There was nothing other than a very, very remote connection, which the rest of the defendants in this matter said she had no part in it, which I found interesting. So it involves some very prominent people, and I'm looking at a minor addition with that to protect these very prominent people that reminds me an awful lot of what I'm looking at with this Diddy matter.
Right, because I want to a couple more things I want to insert here. You know, how did this whole thing start? It started from Cassie's civil lawsuit, and then the hotel video dropped, and then all of a sudden Homeland is raiding his homes. And then two, the second thing I want to insert here, his lawyers, they filed for yet another mistrial today. Well, I think it was over the weekend they submitted the papers, correct?
They did.
For a mistrial. Now, any word on that? Did the judge just say no?
Yeah. Well, let's be real. He is not going to declare a mistrial, but he has not declared anything. But they said that they wanted a mistrial because one of the witnesses, they said that there was prosecutorial misconduct and that one of the witnesses seemed to them to be blatantly lying. And they said, listen, on the prosecution side, you should have known that she was lying. And because of that, we are declaring a mistrial. So the judge, he'll give his decision, but he will not declare a mistrial. I mean, here's what's true. The Southern District of New York is known for its conviction rate. They are not going to let this go down like that. Just in the same sense that I don't think there's going to be a mistrial with a hung jury. Granted, I don't know for sure. It only takes one person, but my guess is that the judge, and you tell me, Judge Brown is going to say, go back and work out an answer in this. And you remember with R. Kelly, one of his cases, they were in deliberations for 11 hours. Another federal case, 22 hours. I think for as long as it takes, the judge is going to say, go back to work. We're not having a mistrial on this one.
I've had trials deliberate for a long, long time. I tried 42 first-degree murder cases as a defense counsel where death penalty was demanded, and a bunch more where they weren't demanding that. And I got the youngest person in the world on death row off death row with a unanimous decision by the Arkansas Supreme Court. So I know how death penalty cases can be involved. The one thing that gets me is the venue. Search warrant is served in California. Search warrant is served in Florida. And interestingly, there's something about that. On one of the properties involved, the one in Florida, Diddy had two mansions. They only searched one mansion. They didn't search the second one. But yet, there is deemed to be sufficient connection to bring this thing to, as you say, jurisdiction that has a very high conviction rate.
I mean, one of the things is perhaps the fact that some of these crimes did also take place in New York City.
Yeah.
So that's the connection. But you're right that, when we talk about, venue shopping, they shopped for a very good one and got what they wanted in the Southern District of New York because they did have options, but we know why they chose this one.
The other thing, are you keeping up with this complaint that 70-some basically outside lawyers and professors filed against Bondi down in Florida, alleging her unethical conduct as U.S. prosecutor by giving instructions to stop this kind of thing that's going on with the Diddy case? They complained and they had some announcements on media today about it. I think there's a connection.
I have not seen that, but I will definitely be checking that out because, it sounds to me, especially with all the people that you've defended, that obviously you would have charged in a different way. And I'm wondering what you would have charged because, you are boiling it down to, look, this is just a pimp who's a sex addict. If you were to have taken this, what would the charge have been?
Frankly, I'm not so sure I would have sought the proffer of charges anyway. The other thing is what I have seen, there might be a good solid state case for prostitution, but I'm a little perturbed about bringing the federal system to play on this whole thing. It disturbs me because I think I've handled several thousand cases in trials where we actually went to trial over the last 50 some years. And when I see what I'm looking at, almost invariably, somebody is somebody's friend trying to protect or shield them. And the question comes up is who is being shielded? It just reeks of that.
And that's the discretion that a lot of people know about firsthand when it comes to prosecutors. If you know the right people, and you can probably expound on this obviously even more, then you may not even get charged if you know the right people. Yeah.
So, I'm astonished at 14 pages for basically a simple 5-count indictment. It's like we would have to really bust it, file all kinds of motions, and go back into court over and over again to even get a reasonable explanation of what the government's theory was, which they didn't have to tell us. But here they gave a press conference on it. This is also the same U.S. Attorney's Office that on the mayor went off on, 57 pages on that indictment with how many counts? Relative to Mayor Adams.
Right. And you're talking about Damian Williams once again.
Yeah, in pictures and photographs of hotels and hotel rooms. And frankly, I've never seen photographs included in an indictment that weren't crime scene photographs, but were basically, look, how did he afford this place? Aren't you? And I'm just going, my goodness. You can't even get them to utter a peep. And here they go at great length and have a press conference.
I will say, too, that doesn't sit well with me because you really are tainting the jury pool on so many levels because you're presenting so much evidence and pictures that it's hard if you don't watch it that you don't think anything else.
Yeah, one thing, back to your question you asked, what would I have done if I was a judge? See,
Yes.
if you are a good judge, here's what you know. One, a jury verdict, if it's not guilty, if it's acquittal, can end the whole thing. All right, that's it. If somebody makes a motion to recuse or something else like that, you can say, you know what, there is a good point here, but I'm not going to rule on it now. I'll take it under reservation. Let this guy get a chance at getting a not guilty verdict. Because if there is a guilty verdict, then what happens is I'm not cut off from acting as essentially a 13th juror and saying there's error right here, and in a motion for new trial, I will grant this request to make sure that the justice prevails. Now, that's one way of looking at it, but some of the judges now, honest to God, we've got one person that's on the Court of Appeals, Circuit Court of Appeals. This person, just to illustrate the point, was a federal district court judge. The woman went to law school after putting her husband through law school. She got out, passed the bar. She met the minimum age for being a state circuit court judge a month before she was sworn into the bar. She got sworn into the bar. 4 days later, Lamar Alexander, the governor here, made her a circuit court judge. She didn't know anything about it because literally the first time she'd ever stepped in a courtroom was as the judge. Ronald Reagan nominated her and got her approved as a federal district court judge 14 months after graduating from law school. She was still 30 years old, and she had never been in anybody's courtroom as a lawyer, but she became a federal judge. Now she's on a circuit court of appeals.
Let me ask you this, Candace. What are your thoughts on the judge in this Diddy case?
You know, the judge is very, listen, if there's any judge that you would want, it would be this judge, who is very, very fair, very seemingly very, very fair, very equal in his overrulings and sustainings. And he also is someone who, listen, there are no cameras in the courtroom. So he doesn't have to do this for any show. He's doing it on his own, which is great. Granted, you have enough reporters in there that are reporting on it, but it's much different when you have a camera in the courtroom. And it seems as though this is his practice and nature of being a fair-handed man in terms of what he gives out to the prosecution and the defense.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, nothing funny, nothing tricky.
Like I said, just because the judge denies an initial motion to recuse or something like that, or to grant a new trial, does not mean that he isn't considering it. And if the judge has experience, he knows that it's probably best and will stop everything if you get a not guilty verdict from the jury. So give the defendant his opportunity to get that verdict, and you still have the opportunity to promote justice by granting the motion at a later point.
So, okay, so here's another question, and I know this is like your 4th, 5th interview, so I don't want to keep you here.
Oh no, that's okay. Look, I'm up for it.
Because we still got to get into the LA riots, but yeah, but okay, so if Diddy is found guilty, here's the thing: will he go broke? And what does that say for wealthy men and men who are rich? Because rich and wealthy can be two different things, but men of very high means. What do that say when we're talking about relationships for non-celebrities? So New York had that, what was it, the look back law.
Yes.
It allowed women to come forth and say, listen, I was art or sexually assaulted, or he just hurt my feelings. But what happened, New York and New Jersey, because New Jersey lawyers got in on it too, But what happened, the lawyers in New York State got together and said, well, we're only going to take cases basically of complaints against people who make, I believe was like $500,000 because they need to see a profit from it. It all comes down to money. So when you look at it, the whole dynamic of how you date, don't fly a woman out to come see you because that could be considered human trafficking. This is why I'm not siding with Diddy and his behavior. No, but legally, you're charging this man with RICO and trafficking, um, interstate, bringing in people interstate or whatever. And these were his girlfriends. So paying for prostitutes, okay, is wrong. So what I'm saying is, what if he is found guilty? Will he go broke? And what does that say about the future of relationship dynamics?
Could I ask you one question? If you're familiar with New York law, what is the statute of limitations on filing a wrongful death action?
A wrongful death action? I'm not sure about that.
I think it's 2 years, isn't it? In other words, there's a tort.
It's a tort, exactly. Wrongful death. I mean, I can't imagine that it would be much longer because if somebody dies, how long do you actually need, right?
Yeah.
You don't need 2
So
years.
the thing that gets me is I'm not getting on. I understand the sentiment, but because somebody squeezed somebody's body parts 19 years ago, why is the statute of limitations extended to embrace that? But on a homicide, a wrongful death, it's only 2 years or 1 year, depending upon the state. Doesn't make sense to me.
I see your point. I see your point. Listen, I think the Me Too movement had a lot to do with that. I think the ability for women and men to come forward with their stories and open up that door, whether you believe in the Me Too movement or not, that is what really was the linchpin to open up these doors in New York City. And Cassie got in right down in the nick of time, and so did a lot of other people. But you're right, the logic is imbalanced. In that case, let's open up everything else so that people can come with their claims. And let's extend things by, a decade or two. But it's kind of like Lyle and Eric Menendez. Nobody was talking about that until they made, the series. And then it became an issue. And now they're going to, be paroled soon. So it's just it's in our cultural conversation, and it has a lot of currency the more that we are talking about it. And so that's why I mentioned Eric and Lyle, and that we were talking about it. So all of a sudden it was on somebody's table. We're talking about rape and allegations and the casting couch. And so that's why it became more of an issue. And that's what happens when we as a culture bring things and make them rise so that everybody is talking about it. That's why the algorithm is so important. You got folks talking about things that they never would have talked about, but all of a sudden it's in their algorithm. So I think that that's the main reason why. But you definitely make good sense. But Dana, to answer your question in terms of, all right, well, what could he potentially lose? Well, we know that already. If he was worth almost $1 billion, we know that he's lost a lot already, and that now records are saying that he's worth $400 million. So now he's got half of what he is making. He's got 9 lawyers. All right. He's probably spending $100,000 a day for people who are working around the clock in order to deal with this case. So slowly but surely, his value is going down every single day. Let's start there. But in terms of what he could lose, if they can connect it, they, meaning the prosecution, can connect it with everything that he did. For example, this happened in this particular house. Well, that's connected to the crime if he raped Cassie in that house, or if he beat Cassie in that house. And then remember, we've got the civil lawsuits that it could also connect, and there could also be a forfeiture civilly without any type of criminal prosecution. So the potential of him losing, if the jury says yes to RICO, is he loses everything, even his interest that he had in Revolt, which he no longer has now, right? Revolt is now owned by people who have an interest who work there. It's owned by the workers. If that is said to be a part of his criminal enterprise, he loses that too, even though he has no financial interest in it today. So everything is at stake. His publishing, his royalties, his Sean John, even though it's not worth that much, everything that he has, his cars, his jet, his homes, everything could be at stake. Everything.
I do know he's still making money renting out his private jet and renting out his mansion in LA, which can help just pay for the legal fees, probably just for a month alone, but it helps. But that's what I was getting at when we were speaking early and tonight. You know, if he is found guilty, record companies, they're going to swoop in and try to claim all those
Yeah.
masters.
Well,
So
they wouldn't be
the
able to. That
legacy,
would be subject to RICO confiscation too. If
Correct.
they had a successful RICO thing, there'd be nothing for anybody to get. And the point is what is the U.S. government going to do with the rights of the properties?
Right. Well, what they normally do, and you're right, it might look different on paper than in what happens in reality, but they fund victims' rights, they train police officers, they, could train a dog program, they could use it for witness protection program. That's what they say. Once they get all of that money under their umbrella, those are the types of things that they do with it. Judge, you are correct. Once it's gone, it's gone. And the other thing is, my sister works in music publishing, and there's always this question of, is it tainted so much that anybody would want the music anymore? For R. Kelly, I think that was a big issue. I think that people are, there not a lot of people are putting that music on at the wedding, but I think that after a while,
people still want the Diddy
yeah,
music. People
I think so. For some reason, and maybe because it didn't involve children, in terms of these particular charges. I don't know what else is out there. Maybe that is it, but no, people aren't turning off Faith Evans. They are not in the way that they shut down R. Kelly. No.
Well, R. Kelly kind of admitted his crimes by what he was talking about doing, and he didn't see any problem with it. He kept saying the parents consented, but that's like, wow, this is what I'm doing, but the people who were supposed to say no didn't, so it's not my fault. Well, you did it.
Mm.
So I have one more question on the Diddy topic, and then I'm moving to the LA riots. Will Diddy take the stand, and do you think he should take the stand?
We can say this together, right, Judge? This man should not take the stand. Here's how I look at it. Do you remember his apology video, people who are out there? The apology video that he prepared, I don't know, it was at least a couple of days he had to say, all right, let me apologize. And you see what he came up with? That did not work.
Let me offer a historical perspective on that. That very courtroom that this is being held in, or that division of New York's federal courts, there was a gentleman nicknamed Lucky Luciano. He is the godfather of godfathers. He formed the syndicate. He was almost untouchable. And they put on a case against him, which was a flim-flam case. Dewey tried the case. He ultimately became New York governor and a candidate for president twice. And he was lusting after getting Lucky Luciano on the witness stand. Well, Luciano's lawyers begged him not to get on the stand, but he said no, he was going to clear his name. And the more he opened his mouth, the more he built a case that previously did not exist against him. So that's not a very good move.
I have another thought about this, and that is Christina Coram, that you might have heard. Her nickname is KK. She's his chief of staff, has been for a while. And we've heard her name dozens of times, the same way that we've heard Suge Knight's name dozens of times throughout this trial. She was his right-hand woman at all times. There were many times where she would be tracking down Cassie or tracking down Jane or tracking down something like, where are you? Where are you? Sean Combs wants you. She was the one who, is making the appointments for a girlfriend to get her teeth redone because Sean doesn't like the teeth. She's there. She's pictures with him. She's at all the white parties. She knows everything. Now, if she takes the stand, she's going to tell it all if she gets immunity, which she probably would have to. We've had 3 people so far take immunity. At that point, if I'm Sean Combs and I'm looking at KK, the one who I've made my chief of staff, who I've trusted with everything, I might feel the ego and gumption to get on that stand, because I might feel like this is all I have left, because she is going to present well. If you've seen KK, she's going to present well, and she's going to give it all up to make sure that she doesn't get in trouble, because really she is the unnamed co-conspirator. Many of these people are. It's just that they're getting immunity and that they're unnamed. But that woman knows everything. Out of everybody, she knows everything. And I think that once she testifies, which I'm the prosecution, I'm making sure that happens. I'm Diddy, I'm talking to my attorneys. Maybe I should testify. That's my thought about it. Like, she's not going to bring me down. Plus, he's got a lot of ego. So first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I was like, no, he's never going to testify. Why? But that KK, the way she started emerging, I think it's going to take a different turn if she takes the stand.
It might. Question is what kind of immunity they're going to give, a testimonial or transactional?
So the level of immunity that they got was not transactional. What they said was, you get this immunity for purposes of anything that's connected to this particular case, except for perjuring yourself, right? Yeah, so she could be still, that opens up the door, right? Still for civil cases. That doesn't kind of stop that. But I think she's going to go for the gold if she does take the stand. I can't see how she would not take the stand. We also haven't heard from security guards. Security guards were there every step.
I don't understand why. Okay, they're going to have to give security guards immunity because they watched everything and they let it go on. They watched Cassie getting beat several times. They did. And
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, all through this trial, we have heard about RICO, organized crime. We have yet to hear anything about anybody being involved in any criminal enterprise. Not one shred of evidence from somebody who got on this stand and started testifying, I was there, I did it.
Mm-hmm. But Judge, is it not the truth that a criminal enterprise is not the way that we imagine, right? People sitting at a table smoking, saying, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. It can happen as a matter of fact that you're a security guard thinking that you're doing a job, but really it translates into you being a co-conspirator. It's not like anybody has to announce it and say, this is who we are. It doesn't have to be a formalized group. It doesn't have to be incorporated. It could be 5 buddies stealing cars.
Yeah.
That could be an enterprise. So I think that I don't know. I think, you know, in terms of if I'm getting the jury instruction, I could go that way. I don't know, Dana, you tell me.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you have a mafioso captain,
okay,
he's got to have soldiers in order to carry out his enterprise. If you don't hear anything about any soldiers except unnamed ones, you don't hear any evidence against them, or you hear something but nobody's indicted, you go, wait a minute, this guy's supposed to be running the criminal enterprise. Where is the rest of the posse?
Yeah,
that's the question that I have, especially, and I'm like, the D-Rock, his name came out of the mouths of a whole bunch of witnesses that came up. And I'm like, this man seen and witnessed everything, all of the bruises that Cassie received, you know, the prostitutions coming in, the drugs. So, and you don't, and okay, aside from the RICO, you don't say, listen, I didn't get hired to do this, because then it's my job to call authorities on you. So at one point, did not just common sense, but your conscience kick in and say, yeah, this is not right. Like, this is beyond, this is not right. It's not normal. But people wanted the money. They wanted the lifestyle. They wanted to be part of that fame and fortune that they did not work for. He did. And he knew that. He knew they were hanger-ons. And I'm sorry, Cassie was a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's
she was
true.
she was a sex addict, she was a drug addict, and she was addicted to the fame and fortune rock and roll lifestyle. This Jane Doe that's up there now, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Capricorn Clark, same thing. You talking about something, well, he was paying me 20,000 for a month, and he would say, "Well, I'm not gonna pay if you don't participate." If this is what this man is into. If you want to be a part of his world and you want to receive all these, tangibles, you got to participate. But
Mm-hmm.
he would say, but if you don't want to participate, okay, fine. Just I'll find someone else. Goodbye. They did not want, they wanted the tangibles and they were willing to do anything for it, which is why if I was a juror, I'm going to say not guilty because the charge, if this is a domestic violence, yes, you're guilty. RICO, no, you're not guilty. I think all you people up here are sick.
Dana,
Let-
let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, Dana. You don't have to speak from your own personal relationships, but we all know that not all relationships turn out well, right? And there's a point in a relationship where you are happy and, oh, let me please this person. Yeah, I hate football, but I'll go to football games. Whatever their threshold is, you can have both exist. You can have someone say, you know what, I was down for this, but then it changed. Then he started holding this over my head. So I think you can have both. I think you can have the, yes, I love the lifestyle, I love the shopping, $500,000,
Stockholm
was
syndrome.
dropped. What's that?
Stockholm syndrome.
True. And also, you're holding this video over my head. What am I going to do about this? Because you're not going to lose anything because I'm the one he's not releasing videos of the both of us. He's just releasing the videos of me. And so then that's where I think it changes. And so if we look at the dynamics of just a relationship that we all have, and again, I'm speaking like this because we are on the prosecution side. When we start talking about the defense's side, I'll have more to say. They just haven't made their case. So it might seem unbalanced in terms of me saying this, but I'm just saying, so far, we know how relationships change. And I think that that's what jurors might take away, that sometimes this is the evolution of a relationship, especially when you're holding something over my head and have my mama involved. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, well, your mama knew that you were with a monster, and
True. She
and
took pictures of the bruises.
probably benefiting. He gave the money back. It seemed like it was a lot of mind games going back to the manipulation was going on here, but yeah, when you're sucked into that type of toxic relationship and everybody's high, you really got to hit rock bottom to just leave. And it took when Kim Porter, when she passed away, that's when Cassie left. But then
Mm,
you find out when Cassie took the stand because when going back when Kim Porter passed away and it was announced, and then all of a sudden we see Cassie married less than 6 months or something after that.
uh-huh.
A lot of people were saying, "Oh, she bounced and dumped Sean because thinking that maybe Diddy has something to do with Kim Porter and she didn't want to turn out like that." That's what people were talking. However, during this trial, no, after Kim Porter passed away and Diddy was mourning for Kim Porter, she left. She finally left because he said Kim was my soulmate.
Mm, mm.
So she said, it's never going to change. I'm never going to be the one, but you never were the one. And that's why she stayed all those years, hoping that he would just finally make her the one. And if anybody was going to be the one, he should have married Kim Porter. But that's why, come to find out, that's why she left, because he said in a text and on the phone, because Cassie said it, that Kim Porter was my soulmate.
Yeah. Now you are correct. I'm wondering two things. One, I'm wondering about the power of the expert witness, and then I'm also I want to share that during the opening arguments, the defense, that is key to what they said, that this particular case is about two things. It's about domestic violence and jealousy. And so they really made that clear. And they've been trying to drive it home. They'll probably do it more when they have their chance. but they did try to kind of nitpick, to get some jealousy aspects out of this. But I'm wondering how the expert witness kind of sits on people, especially domestic violence witnesses, Judge Brown, that you have seen. Do they help contextualize, or do you think that they add layers that may not sometimes be helpful?
It helps if the jury is disposed to go for what they have to say.
Hmm.
Jurors are so prone to disregard anything that has to do with mental health. They just don't believe in it unless they've actually had to run into it themselves. I used to tell some of the prostitutes I represented, I said, look, I can get you out of this mess you're in with your pimp, but you have to stay off the hoe track. If you keep going back out there, he's going to grab you again. You'll be right back in thrall inside of 2 or 3 days. And I could get them out of it, but they never would stay off what we call the hoe track. They'd be right back out there and they'd get grabbed.
Hmm.
And there was a dynamic that was involved with them having this self-hate, low self-esteem thing. And they thought they deserved to be punished. So they would keep going back to somebody that treated them in a fashion that was consistent with the way they perceived themselves. It was kind of a sick thing. I'm sure they can get a psychologist to do that, but it happens often in Hollywood. That's one of the best kept secrets with the motion picture and television industry, is how little some of the stars think of themselves. And that's why you run into so many that OD on drugs.
Sure,
It's
because of
not,
how they think about themselves.
yeah, they are not getting high to get high. They're getting high to die.
Yeah. So, I used to work on the domestic violence response team. I'm in New Jersey, and I work with a lot of women, and I would go and give them guidance, sometimes in the hospital where, their mouth would be busted. They would still want to go back to their husband for a lot of reasons. But to be up and close and personal and to really be able to accept expert witness testimony, you do get a clearer picture as to, okay, why is this happening? You get caught, you're brainwashed in it. You think you don't have your self-value and self-worth is attached to that person who's abusing you. And then really, it's not like one of those things where, listen, if somebody is an alcoholic, right? If they're off of alcohol for 3 years, what do? We celebrate. Like people talk about it openly. You get a cake. You might even have a party. I've been sober for 3 years, but not when you're beating someone. It is so quiet. No one's talking. No one talks about, yeah, I'm being beat, or I haven't beaten my wife in 3. No one's taking that. So it's such a quiet, kind of hidden, specific type of thing that a lot of people just aren't in the realm of being open to it to really understand it. And that makes it worse too. We don't talk about domestic violence in the same way that we might talk about someone getting over an addiction, and that is a problem. And I think that that's probably part of like you said, why people may not be open to it. We're just not trained to hear a psychologist to try to understand what's going on. We just don't talk about it openly.
You're right when it comes to certain categories. I had the unusual experience of having a prostitute who was also a stripper, very pretty woman. She's very smart. I can't get into too many details because now she's a practicing clinical psychologist.
Mm.
And she and I went over this, and what our conclusions were when we went through her history and those of a lot of the other prostitutes was people want to be accepted as they perceive themselves. And they have such a low thing about their own self-image that when the pimp sells them, they're dumb, stupid, ugly, and nobody will put up with them but them. They say he sees me as I really am, and when he beats me, he knows that I'm an evil person and I deserve this. Interestingly enough, it was her thesis she wrote, and I found it interesting that a pimp can't turn out a woman, but her preacher can,
Mm.
and her female relatives can. And the pimp just becomes a parasite who can recognize somebody who's been corrupted and come in and treat them like they perceive they ought to be treated. So it's like I found out when I was rehabbing people,
Mhm.
You can't rehab them and get them to want to live. You have to get them to want to live before they'll rehab, because what they do is a form of self-destruction because of their negative self-concept.
Mhm. Mhm. You know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I
I'm
was gonna eventually switch gears to LA. Did you want to stick around for that conversation?
You know what? I am going to drop off, but I'm going to be watching y'all about LA and also looking at these
Especially because
videos.
you haven't been paying attention too much about
Well,
because you've been dealing with the Diddy trial.
yeah, today specifically because I was just back-to-back interviews. So I'm going to choose to watch y'all in that regard.
Okay.
But
Very
y'all was so
interesting
fun.
perspective you have.
What's that?
Very interesting perspective you have. It seems objective to me.
Oh, well, I thank you. I thank you. Listen, good people, it was fun. I see all your people, popping up, and you guys have a wonderful audience and just have a wonderful energy. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you,
One
Candace.
suggestion:
Yes,
if
one
you
suggestion.
don't know her, stay the devil away from Nancy Grace.
I'm sorry. You know what, Dana? This is your show, but thank you for that advice. Can I ask you why? Can you do it in 20 seconds? Dana, am I terrible?
Okay, I'll tell you why.
So he'll tell you.
I'll tell you why. I knew a lot of the judges out in LA, recruited some of them to law school. So when I went out there, they gave me a tour of the evidence room and I talked to a lot of people. And Nancy Grace was saying today, just devastating evidence against the defense. And people were saying it was pretty good for the defense. And I recorded every scrap of the thing. And I said, it doesn't get any better than that from defense. And she was just simply lying to the public and relying upon her position to promote herself with the inflammatory tale that probably has most of the country thinking OJ got away with murder, when most of the people that heard the trial said, what was that all about? They didn't have any proof against the man, and they had a lot of it that the man was framed.
Mm.
She does
So
a lot of sensationalism too. Whereas, and this is what I'm saying, I really, really do appreciate you coming up on my platform. And I really need to shout out the new party, Nora, because you met Nora when she was there.
I did,
That's
yes.
how I got the connection with you, through Nora from the new party. And that's when the judge said you're very objective, and you are, because a lot of people, especially legal analysts that have platforms, big platforms, a lot of them are just one-sided, but they're sensationalize a lot of stuff. To whereas no, you're going to talk about the prosecutors, the defense, the jury, the judge, the atmosphere in the courtroom, outside the
Mhm.
courtroom, because it all matters. One more thing, what was it? What was the name again that Diddy hired for the finance? What do you call that again?
Oh, a forfeiture asset specialist, and the name specifically is Stefan Casella from the Department of Justice. He does this expert consulting work if anybody wants to look up more about him, but a forfeiture asset specialist.
And they do what exactly?
These are the people who will come in and help you. What you're really doing is you're asking the court, first of all, for kind of a bill of goods. If, for example, this is a very vague, all-inclusive, everything is we're getting the jets, we're getting the cars. This person will kind of work with the courts and say, hey, listen, we need you to walk us through why you're trying to take everything. In addition, you want to explain to Sean Combs and his team what it means when things are seized, what might stay, what can go, what are some protections that he has along the way, and then work it out with the judge. So that's someone who, again, will just walk somebody through that. If you do potentially have to give up your assets, I'm going to help you prepare so that it's the best way possible. Oh, can I ask one question? Would you mind? I'm just curious. What does a judge think that the plea deal offer looked like? Because that has been under wraps. I'm assuming it was in the 2 digits in terms of how many years he would serve. He certainly turned it down. But
you can't do a plea bargain in the federal system for time. All you can do is for what they call a cap. In other words, you can plead out to something with a 5-year cap, and how much of that 5 years you get is up to the sentencing guidelines. If it's 10, it's 10. And the thing about federal time is there's no more federal parole. So if you get 5 years, it's 60 months, and you wind up being in federal custody one way or the other for 56, 57 out of the 60 months before you're released. And if it's 10 years, it's 120 months. You wound up being 116 to 118 months. You're in federal control, under federal control, not on parole, but in their custody.
Yeah, those federal guidelines are important. I always like to teach, and so I would tell people, look at the federal guidelines. You know, they have them for a reason, so that they are similar across the board. And if you look at them, you'll see how they work. But it's a good way.
Lawyers ought to do. Most of them zone out when it comes to looking at the guidelines before you get in there. Always pay attention to the guidelines. And another one, if you want to understand the process better, get yourself a copy at the local law school bookstore of federal procedure.
Oh, yes.
They're usually thin and underline, interlineate, footnote, and such like, and that'll give you a big shot up on understanding what's going on that a lot of lawyers don't get because they zone out. They aren't interested. It bores them.
That's true. And the more informed you are, the better your questions, the more rights you have to advocate for yourself if you know about the law. People are just scared of the law, which is why I try to break it down in the simplest of terms so that people can say, you know what, I can sue, or this is what I need to do if my son gets in trouble. You have to know the details of the law. So thank you again, y'all, for having me.
I already said I would love for you to come back because I want to have you to myself.
Okay, yes. Listen, Verdict Watch is coming soon. That's a whole nother thing, but that's going to be a kind of a crazy time. So
it is, and I do plan on coming back out there the end of June, the last week, because that's what I'm thinking. That's when they're going to wrap up. Because the judge said he wants to be done by July 4th. So.
Absolutely.
So I said I'm gonna make it my business to come up there to be amongst the rest of the content creators.
Let me know, because we're gonna have to work that line. I mean, I've been there at 5 a.m. and been, the 20th person. You gotta work that line. So
all right, thank you so much, Candace Kelly.
All right, bye-bye. Good to meet you, Judge.
Handles in the description. Thank you so much for coming on, and definitely love to have you back.
All right, enjoy.
Give her my number. If you need any consultation, give me a yell. If you got any.
I absolutely will. Dana will connect me. I'll do that. Great talking. Have a good night, y'all.
You too. Bye-bye. Lovely guests.
Very nice. Now, I like guests like that. Now, let's get on to LA.
All right. So, let me just do a quick backstory because the LA riots started Friday when a prominent California union leader is facing federal charge after he was arrested Friday, June the 6th, during a confrontation with authorities at an immigration raid in downtown Los Angeles. David Hirota, he is president of the Service Employees International Union in California, SEIU, is facing one charge felony conspiracy to impede an officer after he was arrested by federal officers on Friday. Horeto remained in federal custody until today, June 9th, when he was released on a $50,000 bond. So basically, he was protesting when the federal government, ICE, was deporting or arresting workers, undocumented workers. Federal prosecutors allege David Hirota deliberately obstructed agents from assessing a work site suspected of employing undocumented immigrants by sitting in front of the business's only entrance gate for vehicles. That's when
I'll give them some time. If they prove their allegations, that'll get him some time. And also, it becomes the basis for Trump sending in National Guard, which he naturalized, Marines, and this idiot acting a big fool here. She can get charged. Remember me citing over and over again Title 8, Section 1324. And it says official status is no protection from this. So obviously, in her ignorance, she's repeatedly and flagrantly violating federal law. And what she's doing amounts to a conspiracy, and it carries about 10 years minimum in a federal penitentiary. So it might be interesting because there is no adult probation, or at least not over 25, except in certain circumstances, and I don't think she qualifies for them. So it might be interesting.
So it says
And
here, okay. It says,
go
um,
ahead.
no, it says Maxine Waters tried to force her way into the Los Angeles federal building to check on the union leader, David Horetta, defying federal officers' orders and insisting her congressional authority gave her the right to do so. I want to play this clip.
No, it doesn't. Not that.
All right, so let me play this clip real quick.
No, I want you to. Hello, hello, hello. Congresswoman Waters, I just came to use my congressional authority to check on David.
Ma'am, our lobby is securely now to all visitors.
Excuse me, I need to get in.
Contact our public affairs office.
I need to get in.
What are you hoping to do, Congresswoman?
I just want to see David Huerta. Right.
You are entitled to do that.
Would a congressperson normally be able to enter the...
Normally, yes.
No, you're
Yes.
not.
Well, there were some of the authorities, I don't know who they were. And I'm trying to get in to see David Huerta, who they have arrested. He is the head of SEIU local union here. I don't know why he was targeted. I don't know what they're doing with him. I don't know whether they're going to deport him. I want to report back to my caucus about what's happening, but they have.
See, that's garbage. You're not entitled to go visit that man unless you are a practicing attorney or you set up a family visit. So she's way out of line.
Yeah, she said she had authority to do so.
She does not under American law. There's a separation of authority. Remember, the executive branch, which includes ICE, has separate powers from the legislative branch, which she represents, which has separate powers from the judicial branch. Now, if the court decides to enter an order permitting her to go in there, that's one thing, but she just can't barge in there, and she has no authority as an unlicensed person to go talk to an inmate. Okay, excuse me, put that down. No. Now, see, she's way out of line. And by the way, every time I read Title 8, Section 1324, it specifically says over and over official status is no defense to this. And then now they're talking about the governor, Newsom, and the mayor are upset because Trump is sending in Marines for the specific purpose of guarding the federal immigration officials so they can do their duty. That's not unprecedented. Presidents have been doing it for a long time to make sure that the mail got through. Let's see, Eisenhower brought in the 101st, formerly Airborne, now Air Mobile Division into Little Rock in 1956 because Governor Faubus of Arkansas was disregarding the desegregation mandates. So he brought in 15,000 troops. The LA riots, they nationalized the California National Guard and sent them in there. They've had all of those labor disputes up until the 1940s where the Army got sent in. Let's see, they sent in the Army under MacArthur to deal with the veterans who were protesting about not getting the promised pensions. This has been going on forever. Let's see, Grant sent in the Army. Other presidents have done that. They sent the Army down to the southern border back in 1915 and 16 when other things were going on down there and there was massive disorder. So it's nothing unusual with that. The National Guard got brought in when they dealt with that thing at Kent State. So they're talking, legal scholars say this is unprecedented. I don't buy that they're very much of a legal scholar if they're unaware of this long tradition, 235 years of American history.
I want to play this clip of the mayor.
Now the Los Angeles Mayor, Karen Bass. Hi, Mayor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
Hi. So what are
you
you and your police force? I know how busy you are preparing for the hours ahead. What are you expecting on that front?
Well, I just have to say that if you dial back time and go to Friday, if immigration raids had not happened here, we would not have the disorder that went on last night. I will tell you that it is peaceful now, but we do not know where and when the next raids will be. That is the concern, because people in the city have a rapid response network. If they see ICE, they go out and they protest. And so it's just a recipe for pandemonium that is completely unnecessary. Nothing was happening here. Los Angeles was peaceful before Friday. When we find out when and where the other raids are going to happen, that will determine how the police respond.
Well, let me put a question here. You are not upset about this absolute violation of federal law, so your thing is to protect it? What's wrong with you? And that's what the Marines are getting sent in for, the 400 some Marines, or 4,000, however many, 400, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And that is to protect these federal agents who are carrying out their jobs. So ICE is supposed to apprehend those people who come in illegally. Some clowns are talking about all the illegals are doing is being present without papers, which is an infraction. No, it's not. That's one of the minimum things they can be charged with, including a whole bunch of other stuff, basically felonious. So what are you trying to do? Condone the breach of public peace, dignity, and order and protect these people? Well, Section 1324 says that's a felony to do that, to aid, abet, advise, counsel, procure, give comfort and assistance, to assist in escaping apprehension by customs authorities, to assist people from being apprehended and taken into custody for violation of the immigration laws. That's a felony. Mm-hmm. And it specifically does not exempt somebody because of the office they hold or the buildings that it occurs in. So technically, one of the reasons that they might not deal with Mayor Bass is, from what she's been doing under my reading of those statutes, Title 8, Section 1324, she herself has arguably committed a number of felonies, including conspiracy, aiding and abetting, et cetera, and should be taken into custody as a felon.
So, right. And why are they defending the people who are tearing up the city and doing this? No one did not tell them to start being violent and burning up cars. I want to play this clip here because
wait, one other point. See all the smoke and flames and the violence?
Yeah.
This is brought to you by the same people that were upset at 180 people committing misdemeanor trespass and malicious mischief in the Capitol. They don't seem to have a problem with felonious arson here.
Right. I want to play this clip here. It says Los Angeles Unified School District has instructed LAPD to directly interfere with ICE, the military, and any other federal agency.
Who in their right mind would accept that reality? So I want to be reassuring to our community. Every single graduation site is a protected site. I have directed our own police force to redouble their efforts and establish perimeters of safety around graduation sites to intervene and interfere with any federal agency who may want to take action during these joyous times that we call graduation. Not on our watch.
That carries 5 years in a federal penitentiary, what he just did.
Right, because what is he talking about? Because
violating the law, aiding and abetting. He's ordering people under his charge to disregard federal law and interfere with federal officers in the execution of their duties. Ooh, wait, you dumb idiot.
But why would the ICE agents come to a graduation?
Because they're likely to find people there who are visiting to celebrate somebody they love getting through. They catch a lot of people that way.
He's just getting ahead of it. He's just getting ahead of everything.
I know, and for him to advocate and say what he said, he's committing a federal crime. If he gives those instructions he's talking about and not just puffing because he's running his big mouth off, he's looking at some federal time if they follow the law. See, they've been counting on the Biden administration ignoring the law.
Right.
But the law is pretty strict, and it's nothing new. I mean, what is this, 1979? I had a famous case down here where the judge took a thick Black's Law Dictionary and hurled it from his bench down to the ground because I got my client found not guilty of harboring a federal fugitive. And he lambasted me and her for being guilty, and I'm grinning away. It was a travesty of justice for the jury not to find the woman guilty. So anyway,
so
it's what it is.
It says here, Secretary Rubio, right, just delivered, it said, a masterclass on why Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act against Trende Aguara, I know I'm the TDA, the Venezuelan gang terrorizing American city. He says that the Alien Enemies Act is how we defeat Venezuelan gangs, right? So, and I wonder how many of these gang members are in the middle of these protests, really tearing stuff up.
Well, how about this one? The United States sent General John J. Pershing on an expedition into Mexico where future great General George S. Patton made a name for himself to chase down Pancho Villa because he crossed the border with just a couple of thousand Mexican troops, broke the border.
Right.
So, I mean, we've got 50 million, 40 million. So that, that's historic precedent. I don't get it. Or do these people ever read history? No, they don't. That's right. They don't, do they?
Breaking, Pentagon deploys 700 Marines to LA protests.
Good.
What exactly does that look like when you
700? That is a battalion.
No. Like when they get there, what are they're going to be shutting everything down?
No, they're just going to be escorting the ICE people. And instead of just having on Kevlar vests and helmets and a pistol, they're going to have M4s. They're going to have Berettas or SIGs. They're going to have Kevlar, smoke grenades, advanced communications. Remember, I hope it doesn't go there, but remember what happened with Kent State back in the 60s?
Yeah.
See, that's where you're going. And for these fools to sit there and say this is all right and invite these people in, even real stupid people get the idea. Like when Eisenhower sent the 101st Division down to Little Rock and they came in there, it got real peaceful.
Great point. I think people forget about that. And it's very important. That's why it's important to remember history.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to bring up. Oh, this is what I wanted to say. Guys, please hit the like button. I have not said that all night. I have only a little over 500. Let's get to 700 likes. Thumbs up, share. If you would like to send in a super chat, please do so. If you have any questions or comments, but everybody just hit that like button now. Appreciate you guys. So let's go here. I'm taking Trump to court. Sues over National Guard deployment in LA.
That sounds so ridiculous. since what the Governor Newsom has done subjects him probably to a 10-year sentence in a federal penitentiary.
So he says Gavin Newsom is following up with his threat to sue President Trump over the deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles because California governor just filed a case against POTUS over it. Newsom and the state of California are suing Trump, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and the U.S. Department of Defense over what Newsom says are illegal actions to deploy members of the California National Guard. Does he have?
Do you think that President Eisenhower waited until Governor Faubus gave him permission to send the 101st down to Little Rock in 1956? Do you think that President Truman, President Roosevelt, President Hoover, they asked for the governor's permission before they sent in Army troops to break up railroad strikes? Do you think that President Grant waited for a Southern governor to give him permission to send in the U.S. Army to break up some mess going on with the Klan and the Night Riders in the 1870s? Come on now. You've got a long history. What do you think's been going on in the country? Look at what, I mean, where do these people find themselves? Under what rock have they been squirming?
So it says,
and they're lucky. See, here's the thing. I mentioned to our guest about them filing the action 70 far leftists down in Florida trying to get Bondi disbarred down in Florida for being too aggressive. The point is they are, look at smoke and flames coming up. See that we don't need any more of that. We had 4 years of that with that George Floyd nonsense, and this idiot right here going around telling people to break car windows and storefront windows if somebody supported another candidate. And what did she say? Was it, I don't think it was you and I, it was me and Valerie Denise were doing this thing, and she was out there hollering to the homeless, you need to go home instead of embarrassing people. Somebody said, fool, that's why we're out here. We don't have any homes to go to. What's wrong with you?
mm-hmm.
See, that kind of rank stupidity.
Yeah, so
look at the flames. What are you supposed to do with this? Just say, oh, they're just letting off some steam. What kind of nonsense is that?
So Gavin Newsom says that Trump had no authority to deploy the California National Guard. Is that true?
No, it's not. He can nationalize the National Guard when the law permits. The law permits. He has the right under the existing laws to protect other federal agents in doing their job. What happens if the FBI gets overwhelmed? I'm not a fan of the FBI, but what happens if they get overwhelmed? What happens if the Secret Service gets overwhelmed? You just let them get done in, or do you send the Army in, or the National Guard, or bring in the Army Reserves?
So he says that the statute the president invoked clearly requires the action to go through the governor.
It does not. The governor may be part of the problem. The historical context is the governor of Arkansas stood in the doorway of Little Rock High School and said, as long as I'm governor of Arkansas, there will not be a Negro that sets foot in a Little Rock High School. Do I make myself clear? So what happens when the governor is part of the problem? Did you ask him, look, please be reasonable, man. You're really making a mess here. Can you just stand down on this one? No, I'm not standing down. There ain't going to be no diggers that gets up in Little Rock High School.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the governor, what happens when the governor is part of the problem? Which he is. See, all that George Floyd nonsense, BLM nonsense, where it was okay to do billions of dollars worth of property damage, seriously jeopardize people's physical well-being, because you felt emotional, but you get all bent out of shape and try to call it an insurrection when nothing got burned, just a few little pieces of property got damaged. It's about 180 folk, some of whom did a lightweight criminal trespass thing, and you want to start locking people up for years as though they are international terrorists. What's wrong with you people?
So this is Trump, because he's now suggesting that, hey, maybe Governor Newsom should be arrested. Let me play
It
this.
should be. If you read Title 8, 1324, he's broken all kinds of portions of that code.
Let me play.
Allegedly.
Arrest him. Should he do it? I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it's a great thing. He's done a terrible job. Look, I like Gavin Newsom. He's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent. Everybody knows. All you have to do is look at the little railroad he's building. It's about 100 times over budget. We're putting a flagpole over there. Under budget. I always do under budget.
So Trump says it would be a great thing if Newsom was arrested.
Yeah, and see, he can get out of the loop. All that has to happen is for a federal grand jury to be convened, and they can have their secret proceedings and issue indictments. While we whoopee.
So there also have been now some protests popping up in Dallas, and then there were protests popped up in New York, and I have a feeling that this is orchestrated by the Democrats, and they're going to start having igniting these protests popping up throughout the nation throughout the summer. I did a space. Me and Peter did a space last night, and I said that I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrats plan to have multiple riots in major cities across this nation, right?
Just like with BLM and George Floyd.
Yes. And then, of course, legacy media, the CNN, MSNBC, those liberal medias are going to say Red Summer. And they're going to try and compare it to, again, Black suffering of 1919 Red Summer, because they like to do that. It's definitely not the same, but they're going to use that to say this is what they're doing to the Hispanics, the Mexicans.
Did you see the little blurb that's been going around about the LA County Art Museum?
No, I didn't see that.
The mayor of Los Angeles is on the board of directors. So they've got video of the bags of nice throw-size rocks and concrete blocks and bricks and other stuff right in back of the museum in a bin area where they could be reached by protesters. They had been commenting for quite some time over the fact that somebody doing the organizing was putting in concrete blocks, bricks, broken up stones and stuff, baseball sized, and there's no construction in the area, but this stuff would be getting stockpiled a week before some demonstration occurred. And you go on BLM's site and they advertise, we organize, provide transportation and communication for protests and demonstrations. See, they should be indicted for what they're doing because they're organizing criminal activity.
Absolutely.
They advertise it on their site.
So I want to bring this up, right? Because I did not know that the BET Awards were on tonight. And I know you don't care.
I don't care.
No, and I don't care either because this is boring anyway, right? But we talked about Dolce before, and she won an award, right? And she took the time, and I want to play a clip of her speech, but she took the time during her acceptance speech to quote unquote shame Trump for the ICE raids. Where's the clip? Here we go, right here. Give me a sec. Okay, so this is her. Let me make this bigger.
do want to address what's happening.
Give me a second.
Do want to address what's happening right now outside of the building. There are ruthless attacks that are creating fear and chaos in our communities in the name of law and order. Trump is using military forces to stop a protest. And I want y'all to consider what kind of government it appears to be when every time we exercise our democratic right to protest, the military is deployed against us. What type of government is that? People are being swept up and torn from their families, and I feel it's my responsibility as an artist to use this moment to speak up for all oppressed people, for Black people, for Latino people, for trans people, for the people in Gaza. We all deserve to live in hope and not in fear, and I hope we stand together, my brothers and my sisters, against hate, and we protest against it. Thank you, BT.
Who is she? Who is she? Never heard of her.
Yeah, she's a rapper. We talked about her. We talked about her a couple of months ago. She won a Grammy, and I forgot why we talked about her. But it had to do with, because you know how sometimes I do a little bit celebrity thing. So we did talk about her a couple months ago. I forgot. But she's the it girl in the hip hop industry. But yeah, and this is the problem I have with young people of today, where they're not fully aware, because ICE did not just decide, okay, let's just go and arrest Latinos and Hispanics just because. They have a job to do.
Latinos and Hispanics quite often, frequently over the last year, who are all for what Trump does. They're good Americans. They don't like it.
Right. And so she doesn't understand that a lot of people that voted for Trump to do exactly what he's doing.
I'm glad I did.
Yes. I voted for him to do what he's doing. He's doing his job.
Crazy, ineffective, just disorder in all of the big cities that are turning them into islands of chaos and poison.
And so they pick these artists, and somebody put industry plant. Yeah. They call them industry plants, to get up on the stage and to push that agenda of the left and the liberals or the Democrats or whatever, to push against. And I always say this: if you are an entertainer, stay out of politics. Stay out of politics. That is not your genre. So, and then young people who just don't know no better, because they don't know. So they're listening to the BS and they don't even know the real facts. People are here illegally. We had an open border. So the millions of people that was here, are we supposed to just let them stay here? I don't know what happened with the judge. It just went black. Give me a second. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Are you going to have to go out?
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me? Go out. Oh. What else I got? Oh, I got one more thing on my list, and then that's going to be it. How's everybody doing? Did y'all hit that like button? Yes, honey. We're almost at 700. I need 50 more likes to get to 700. To get to 700 likes. I want to get over 700 likes, but yeah. Money Mike, what about assets in his mom's name? Yeah. And just a little something for you and the judge. Thank you, Halamel. Yes, those are. Oh, Benito. Let me. I didn't see you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, I hear you now.
Okay. Benito Gonzalez Jr., he's been a long time listener here when we do the shows. And he says, yes, those are our lands, talking about California. California has not been part of Mexico for centuries. It's not your land anymore. And if it is, come and get it. Do you want to give us a quick history on how California became the property of the United States, Judge?
Yeah, but you know what that sounds like? It's kind of unfair and it's racist. Not what he said, but the whole proposition. That's like if you are European and you're from Germany, you're supposed to support Germany over the United States. If you're from France, you're supposed to support France over the United States. If you're from Denmark, you're supposed to support Denmark over the United States. You see, in other words, people become citizens of various and sundry places. I was just reading about a British hero. He became a general. He was going to law school. He lied about his age, enlisted in the British Army before the 20th century hit. He dropped out of law school. He got wounded 4 times. His daddy got mad at him for running off, but he stayed in the army. World War I, he got shot in the eye and then kept going and got shot. His left ear got shot off. This is all in the same action. And then on another one, he got wounded by a shell which damaged some of his fingers. And he said, just cut them off. I'm going back into action. So the doctor wouldn't cut his fingers off. He ripped them off himself, lost a hand due to amputation, and wore an eye patch with one hand and got shot 8 or 9 more times. And he's one hell of a badass, you know.
But how did California?
But see, he was from Belgium. He was a naturalized English citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So where you choose to live has a lot to do with your situation, but you follow the rules.
How did California
became? Oh, how did that happen? Okay. What happened is in Sutter's Mill, California, 1848, gold was discovered. That prompted a gold rush. San Francisco got set up. A lot of places like that got set up. Los Angeles got set up. Interestingly enough, the first mayor of Los Angeles was a black man, but he was a Hispanic black. And then there was this thing down in Texas where Texas decided they were going to become independent of Mexico. And then there were a number of battles that were fought in the Mexican-American War. And Grant and some other future American generals achieved some success there. And the United States beat the Mexican Navy in a sea battle, and they wound up conquering Texas, and they got California. And in 1851, California became a state. So same thing basically with Texas.
What happened? I did not come off. I think I'm gonna have to go. No, I'm not going back to StreamYards, honey. I'm going to go to OBS somewhere else. What is this? That wasn't me, guys. He's coming back. What happened? Damn, the story was just about to get good. There you go.
How stuff works.
Oh, you was talking the whole time?
Yes.
It knocked you off.
Well, I guess they don't want to hear that.
Oh my God. All right. Can you start from the beginning? How did California become California?
Okay, what happened is Sutter's Mill outside of Sacramento, California. They discovered gold. There was a gold rush. Also, shortly before that, the Texans had decided that they wanted to secede from Mexico and become part of the United States eventually. So wound up having the Mexican-American War. The United States beat the Mexican Navy in a sea battle off the California coast. We won the Mexican-American War. A number of future famous American generals got their start down there. Ulysses Grant, Sherman, such like McClellan. And we wound up getting California, which became a state in 1851. Then we got Arizona, New Mexico. We got Texas. And by right of conquest and acquisition, Louisiana purchased and a number of other things, the country expanded from one coast to the other. So I was mentioning that's what happened with ancient Rome. It started off as one little ramshackle village, and then it spread to 7 villages on the hills of Rome, the 7 hills of Rome. Then they spread to southern Italy. Then they spread all throughout Italy. And then they became part of the biggest empire in the known world. And by the 2nd century AD, Rome had more citizens than the United States did up until the end of the 1960s. So, I mean, that's the way stuff works.
Wait a minute. So Mexico didn't fight the United States for California? We just took it.
They did, but they lost.
Okay, what war was that? What battle was that?
Mexican-American War.
Okay, so the Mexican-American War, that's when we draw the line. Where is that now?
Kind of, sort of. We had already gotten the Louisiana Purchase.
Right.
And we bought, and get this, upon application of what's going on with Iceland and Greenland and so forth right now, we bought Alaska from the Russians. They sold it to us. And we got Hawaii by invitation and by might.
So somebody
By the way, if you ever get to Honolulu, there's a huge statue. It's black and gold of the last High King of Hawaii, Kamalea, I think is his name. And when you read the brass plaque, you find out the statue is not an exaggeration. He was like 7 feet 6 inches tall. And he wound up meeting Queen Victoria and President Theodore Roosevelt.
Who are you talking about?
The last High King of Hawaii. He was 7 feet 6 inches tall.
So it says here, is it true that Spain owned Mexico briefly, then got California and paid them for it? I don't get it.
Spain settled the New World before anybody did. They were one of the world's first international empires that spread beyond Europe. The first big empire past Rome.
Okay.
So they controlled South America, most of North America, and a lot of the Pacific Islands.
Okay.
And that included California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas.
Oh, cool. All right. So listen, now, when we are now, last question on this. Do you think that, listen, Mexicans are very prideful. A lot of Latin people, Hispanic people, they are very prideful and they're fighters. These type of protests, riots, or whatever you want to call it, and California, because it's San Francisco, they started as well, LA, now Dallas. Are we going to see a different type of turn up to where they're really going to turn the heat up because they feel as though, okay, I may be a citizen, but you are deporting my fellow,
maybe
lineage person? Is it a different type of turn up when we're talking about Hispanics, Latinos, Mexicans?
Maybe, but I have seen people of Mexican ancestry, obvious Mexican ancestry, have arguments with each other about, hey, Vato, man, you know, we're Americans, man. We're not from Mexico. So, you know, that's ancestry. But like I said before, did you expect the German Americans to defect to Nazi Germany in World War II? I live in a place called Germantown, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Memphis.
Right.
So did you expect everybody that lived in Germantown to go start supporting Adolf or the Kaiser?
Because this is the thing. Why is it that people, when you come here, right? Why is it that you think you should stay? You know, and if you want to burn our flag, if you want to, you know, say all these nasty things, destroy property and all this riots and stuff like that, why are you here? Like you're literally, your country is 1 foot over a border.
Well, here's the thing. It's novelty. A lot of places south of the border, you do that kind of thing, you get shot on the spot. Not necessarily Mexico, but we're talking about Central America and South America. They put you in prison.
So here's the thing, though. So let me interject this.
So they're happy about the fact that they can protest freely.
Right. And also, why don't they never push back against their government for always making deals with United States when we talk about?
Because they can't. They have to do a full-fledged revolution, the kind that Che Guevara couldn't get started, that Fidel Castro and Che got pulled off successfully down in Cuba. It was dangerous. You just don't go take the opposition and raise hell like Maxine Wastewater is doing. You get shot, put on a wall and executed, or get to prop it up for a few seconds after you get shot. It's a novelty.
All right. So listen, Thursday, we'll talk more on this. I want to just bring one thing here, and then that's going to be it for the night. We have not spoken about Fanny, and she's been very quiet, but this popped up. Fanny Willis defends YSL case after no murder convictions. So let me play this.
Respectfully, Ms. Willis, I asked you about the murder convictions that never came through.
After months of trying to talk to Fulton County District Attorney Fanny Willis about the case, our Chase Howell finally got her answer to the questions at the top of many people's minds.
Hey, Ms. Willis, can I grab you for a quick interview to talk about the YSL case coming to a wrap-up really quick?
It's not wrapped up.
It's about to be, though. Could we maybe talk about, you relied heavily on getting those murder convictions in the YSL case, but no one was convicted in this. What's your message to taxpayers who may say that this was a waste of taxpayer money and their time?
What I want to say to you as a reporter, and I want your other reporters to be responsible, is you keep going to defense attorneys who put their children in private schools, in communities that are not our communities, and really don't care about the African American community. What you need to understand is there were 19 convictions. 7 I decided to null pros, mostly because they were doing life sentences on murder.
Respectfully, Ms. Willis, I asked you about the murder convictions that never came through. What's your message to taxpayers and to the taxpayers that may have...
My message to taxpayers is it was an amazing time. We had 19 convictions. The community is safer. We made sure that we got the resolutions we want. If they're unhappy with sentencing, they should elect other judges.
And you also relied heavily on the RICO law that you had,
and
too.
I'm going to continue to rely on it because it works, it's effective, and it tells jurors the full message.
But other people may say with the other people that it wasn't effective.
Other people weren't elective as a DA.
Okay, well, starting in 2022, Atlanta rapper Young Thug, along with 20 others, were indicted on gang and racketeering charges. 19 of those people, including Young Thug, were convicted on various charges. 9 of them took plea deals for lesser charges. We do have a closer look at all of our coverage on the YSL trial and key moments on our website, 11alive.com.
Should you focus?
See, she's talking about black folk. When she ripped off black tax dollars, she destroyed the ability of the black community to fight crime. She set a bad example and embraced criminality. There is a cloud hanging over her and Wade about fraud, embezzlement, theft, corruption, perjury, and all sorts of other things. So, yeah, she did a great job. And talking about elitism, come on now. Why would somebody who can afford it want to send a child to a school that is populated by the products of your kind of mentality, Miss Willis? You there?
No, I'm here. I said exactly. And thank you again, Big Elvis, the chef. That I'm hoping more would donate. Great commentary. Yeah, a little slow tonight, but it is what it is. But I appreciate you donating, Elvis. Thank you. I want to say thank you again to Miss Candace Kelly for coming on. Great guest. Um, Great guest, and definitely looking forward to have her back on. Did I get to over 700 likes? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. About to reach 800 likes.
You see, one other little comment about the Hispanic category that embraces a whole lot of people. One of my stepmother was Filipino, and she was essentially Chinese, but because she hablaba español, she was.
Well, Spain colonized the Philippines. That's why people speak.
Yeah, she was classified as Hispanic, even though she was Chinese.
Because they colonized the Philippines. Spain.
Yeah, I know, but because she spoke the Spanish language. See, you know, when you get to that box, it says Hispanic, non-Hispanic. If you say Hispanic, you skip all the rest, which goes Caucasian or white, Black or African American, Pacific Rim, you know, American Indian or Eskimo, and you go down, you skip that whole list, and you just have a big lump sum for people who are Hispanic. So I had a tailor. She was a great tailor. She was blonde haired, blue eyed, and her parents were from old Germany.
I want to swing back to Fanny.
Hispanic too, by classification. So, I mean, it's got all kinds of things in there, see.
I want to swing back to Fanny real quick. Why haven't we seen or heard of her sitting in front of the state Senate committee and the congressional Senate committee? Why?
Probably have some grand juries looking at her, and they don't want to take potential evidence by giving her a chance to claim that she was compromised because she was compelled to testify against herself.
Did somebody make deals, backdoor deals?
May have.
Because it seemed like it's all going.
May have.
Wow.
I mean, was there a great deal of discussion about what was going to happen to Diddy before it happened?
I wanted to see her lights, camera, actions just one more time. And I think somebody made a deal somewhere to where, because she wouldn't be able to handle that again. Maybe she would have, but
who's that?
Fanny.
Oh, she's not through.
No, I said we have not seen what happened to the state committee. They
In
said
other words, the state committee is probably backed off so a grand jury can look at it.
Oh.
That and the same with the feds too. See, grand juries take time to investigate, takes time to call witnesses. People start trying to make side deals.
Oh.
And when you're getting a grand jury looking at a case actively, you shut up and let it ride so you don't taint things.
Oh, okay.
See, that's how Ollie North got off. They grandstanded and kept dragging him in front of Congress, and they kept asking him questions that were good for politics. But when they wound up getting a conviction against him, his conviction was overturned on a technical basis. He'd been found to have been compelled to violate his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
So, one last thing, Judge. One last thing. Um, and let me say this. Thank you, Deborah, for the super chat. Deborah Wayne, thank you. I want to share this, and this is it. Where is it? There you go. Let me just read the backstory. Byron Donald's bipartisan initiative to name House Press Gallery after Frederick Douglass passes with unanimous support. Unanimous support. Let me play this. It's only under a minute.
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass House Resolution 137 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 31, House Resolution 137, resolution designating the House Press Gallery rooms H315, H316, H317, H318, and H319 in the United States Capitol as the Frederick Douglass Press Gallery.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 137 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion is to reconsider is on the table.
Frederick Douglass is one of the greatest people in the country's history. He escaped slavery. He was not peaceful about his escape. He became extremely literate and articulate, and he toured all through Europe during the Civil War to keep arms from being shipped to the Confederacy. He helped organize the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, in which two of his sons served with distinction. He helped draft the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And though he was often critical of him, he did have Abraham Lincoln's ear. A great man.
He was a Republican. What?
And an eloquent speaker.
Republicans of that time, the Frederick Douglass Republicans, is there a difference from Frederick Douglass Republicans than the Republicans we see today?
Well, the Frederick Douglass Republicans became known as the Lincoln Republicans. You see them a lot, but mostly they're all white groups now that don't realize that they got started by black folk a long time ago.
Okay.
And black people up until about 1960 were invariably Republican.
Yes. And it only took Martin Luther King Sr. to tell black people to vote and support Kennedy.
Because the reason Kennedy got it, I had to do a report on that. As a requirement for social studies, I had to watch the debate, which was the first one they ever had. And what happened is most every Southern Bubba sheriff was a Democrat. So they had been snatching up MLK every chance they got, banging him around. So Kennedy, being the Democratic candidate for president, called up his boys and said, hey, look, take it easy on this colored guy. You want a Democrat to be president again, so let's get me in. So give him a break. And Nixon didn't have sense enough to make the phone calls. He was above it all. So that came out. And that got a lot of the black folk supporting the Democrats because Kennedy spoke up on behalf of Martin Luther King. The interesting thing is Senator Prescott Bush the Republican senator from Massachusetts, who was father to George Herbert Walker Bush president and grandfather to George Walker Bush president, posted most of King's bonds during the civil rights era to get him out of jail. He also supported Truman when he signed Executive Order 1981, which integrated the armed services. So there was that. They were very vital to the passage of the civil rights bills and voting rights bills in the 1960s because there was such heavy Democratic opposition from the so-called Dixiecrats that represented the old South.
And do you think Black people collectively we would be better if we switch back as a majority on Democrat or to switch back to Republican Party?
Right now, yeah. You see, the paradigm right now is why should a party give you what you claim you want when no matter what they try to do for you gets anywhere? And the other party can deny you, tell you to go to hell and give you nothing, but still have your loyal and devout following. See, in other words, neither party has any incentive to do anything for you.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
This plantation loyalty.
All right. This was a really good show.
Yes.
And thank you again to Miss Candace Kelly. Thank you so much for coming on. And I do want to start bringing in more guests and the right guests. And she's one of the right guests. And I really appreciate it.
Very entertaining to me.
What'd you say?
Professor Kelly was very entertaining to me.
Mm-hmm. And you did. You said she was very objective, which she was. She is. So, all right, Judge. Thank you.
Way lawyers are supposed to be.
Yeah.
You see, what happens now is one of the reasons that a person would hire a lawyer is for the purpose of acquiring somebody who is objective to handle their situation. I've said this before, but I used to, when I was an adjunct professor, assign the class to handle plaintiff, some of them, and defendant, some of them. And then as a surprise, at the last moment, I'd make them switch sides. They'd get upset, but I would say the reason that this is being required is you should be able to represent each side equally, and you should have no emotive involvement in one side or the other. Mm-hmm. That is your job, to be detached and objective.
Andy says, what a clickbait headline. Criminals cause issues in LA, not ICE. I didn't say ICE caused it, but ICE raids is why people started the rioting, because ICE were doing their job. So
yeah, in other words, following the law becomes the grounds to riot. Come on now.
Who was the first Black congressman, and with what party? And with what party you mean?
It was a Republican, and it was in Reconstruction.
Right.
I forget his name.
Me too. Was it Thomas something? Did it start with a T? I think I'm right that it start with a T. Let me see. Who was first Black congressman? No, it didn't start with a T. Herman Revels, the first
Revels, yeah.
Revels, yeah. I said T, it wasn't. All right. Thank you, Judge. Good night.
Good night. Ciao.
Ciao. Let me do the I didn't even have the outro ready or nothing. What I'm doing. It's so ghetto. Okay.